All right. Well, welcome everybody. Namaste. I hope that you have been having a blessed week, and that some of the things that we begin to look at and journey about, that you're experiencing some of those and finding peace and maybe revelation. So there's so much diversity here, and it's amazing to me. The more that the flower blooms, the more colors there is in the flower. So welcome to each and every one of you. I hope that you are well. We're looking at a book that was written about the life of a human being who, just like us, lives on this earth in their physical body, but did not, I guess just like us as well, did not have any knowledge of things that had gone on in the past. And it's been quite amazing for all the years, literally thousands of years now, that Christianity has worked so hard to keep people away from these truths. And it has been successful, even if that success had to come with force and killing and all of those things. A lot of people in our society would be killed by the ancient Christian church as being heretics, and they killed millions of people. And so it's actually is an amazing time in which we live in, that all of the sudden this stuff is being exposed at a greater level. And there's also some things going. One of the things, and I'm starting a writing that may be a few weeks before I get to the point to where we can look at it, but it's one of my historical dives again. And it has to do with the veil. And you guys might be real surprised about what the veil even is. More than just some heavy robe that some writers of the Old Testament chose to hide the truth of what really is going on there. As we go along, you will find that there are many things that you have understood in one concrete manner, and yet what's going to end up coming out is they never meant that. Never did they mean that, except to the people that were supposed to think that's what they meant. And so I've heard in the past, Jewish rabbis that say, all of you people, and especially all Christians, that think you know what the Bible's about, you have no clue what it's about. And by golly, he was absolutely correct. So, but the veil is quite important, and it's just as important in our time as it was in Yeshua's time, as it was even ancient by 4,000 years before that. The veil existed before there ever was an Israel. And so that's just a metaphoric picture that they use to control people. So inevitably we're going to get behind the veil. So, but tonight we're taking a look at Dolores Cannon's book. For those of you who may not know, you can Google Dolores Cannon. She has, I don't know what it is, 40, 50 books, not including the ones that her publishing company in Arkansas has published over the last 25 plus years. She was the world's renowned top hypnotherapist, and created really the only form of hypnotic therapy for the purposes of healing. And I think that's very significant, because even now a lot of psychologists, I think psychiatrists, use hypnotherapists, and they are trying to help you heal, but hers wasn't an attempting to help people heal. She was actively doing this 25 plus years ago. So it's really heavy, and I want to really, as I've shared with most of you that I've talked to, What we're going to read tonight is really preliminary. If you remember, she set the stage for some things. There were some really profound statements in the first chapter that we looked at last week. This week, in chapter 2, I hope that you will continue to be patient with me, because we really get into some meats and potatoes, maybe at the end of this week, or at the end of the evening, but next week we're going to jump into starting to build the picture, and already in less than one chapter, there's some things that are validating some of the beliefs that we have and where we are right now, which is the thing that I find so encompassing. I shared with you guys my Dolores canon regression of a few weeks ago. And so I like have a totally different perspective. I think we had to do that before we got into this book, because I have so much more appreciation for what's really going on here, and some of you may desire to and may never be able to get in a situation to where you can do that. But I assure you, it's eye-opening when things begin to come out and you have no clue about where they came from. So we're going to jump into this tonight. Catherine Harris is the subject of our situation, although she very quickly just becomes a vehicle for the message. I understand that, as you may well. I understand that because I also am just a vehicle for a message. And so if you struggle with reincarnation, then this will give you an eye-opening picture maybe of something that's been hidden from you your whole life. I was told that that's all devil worship, so I got no problems in telling you directly where my perspective is. And I look at that now, and if my grandfather told me that this was devil worship, I would laugh. It's quite humorous how much has been hidden from us. So without waiting any longer, I want to jump in here. As I said, I'm going to move along a little quickly. Anyone who has a desire to, by all means, make a note. If there's something that you hear, something I say that you need help with, our email number is always on every series, ahopmo@gmail.com. By all means, send a message, and I'll be happy to interact with you if I can help you at all. It's really cool, it's really amazing, but even more so, it's profound that the door is being opened and the veil is being rent, that life has never been what the Bible says, which is it's accorded unto every man once to live, and then comes the judgment. And so that verse is really the beginning, the concept of the struggle of their hiding reincarnation from the world. They didn't want you to know that you have lived multiple lives, because if you've lived multiple lives, then by virtue, the thinking person would recognize that must mean that we have no knowledge as to how many lives we're going to live, either before this one or even more so after this one. So we'll carry on, but Catherine Harris, as the book will explain to you who she is and how Dolores got hooked up with her, and then the book will take care of the rest for you. So, who was Catherine Harris, and how did our lives happen to cross? At the time of our meeting, I had no idea what the fates had in store for us. I could not have guessed that we were about to embark on a journey that would last a year and take us backwards to the time of Christ. I believe such meetings are never coincidental. That's a synchronicity, and to be quite honest with you, friends, the more that I learn and the more I live, I absolutely am forming the opinion that agrees with that there is nothing that's coincidence. Even the bad things, even the good things, even the down things, even the up things, all of those things are sent by the universe for you to have to deal with. And if we had all grown up living in that place, then everything about our worlds would be totally different. How we deal with stress, how we deal with problems, how we deal with people, all of those things would be massively modified if you knew that every one of them the universe sent to you to have to go through. It really changes a lot of things. So I was at a party given by a group of people interested in metaphysics and psychic phenomena. There were many there whom I had already worked with in hypnotic regressions, but there were also many strangers. Catherine, who had an interest in and a curiosity about the unusual, was there with a friend. During the evening talk, got around to my work, and as usual, many people volunteered and wanted appointments to be subjects. There is a greater interest in this field than most people realize. Often there is a genuine reason to want a regression, such as looking for karmic relationships, something that none of us had a knowledge of, that there is actually karma functioning in our life that came from other lives. Now, I know that's a strange thing. Many people struggle with it, and it's okay if you struggle with it. Just continue to struggle with it. Source will bring truth that will help you understand. So often there's a genuine reason to want a regression, such as for karmic relationships or to get rid of a phobia. But for the most part, there is just curiosity. Catherine wanted to volunteer, so we set up an appointment. Catherine, or Katie as she was known to her friends, was only 22 years old when I met her that important day. She was short and rather buxom for her age, and with close-cut blonde hair and eyes that sparkled, seemed to see beneath the surface. Her personality seemed to radiate out of every pore of her skin. She seemed so happy and alive, so interested in people. I was to discover later, though, through our association, that often there was a facade to cover her basic shyness and insecurity. She was a Cancer, and people born under that astrological sign are usually not that gregarious, but she had a genuine sincerity about her. She really cared about people and would go out of her way for them. She possessed an innate sense of wisdom that belied her true age, and at the times when signs of immaturity would come through, it seemed out of place. I had to keep reminding myself that she was only 22, the same age as my own son, yet they seemed nothing alike. She seemed to be like a very old soul, and you will hear that quite often, that there is something going on about people, and as we grow and learn, you will begin to recognize that there is a journey, even in the cosmic realm, that we are on. And in a deceivingly young body, and I wondered sometimes if anyone else got the same impression. Maybe you've met people in your life like that. They're very young, but they seem very mature, and there's a reason why they're like they are. Catherine was born in Los Angeles in 1960 to parents whose job required much travel and frequent moves. They were members of the Assembly of God's Church, so Katie's religious background was certainly not one that would encourage thoughts of reincarnation and hypnosis, and since the Assemblies of God's are essentially Pentecostals, any of you that have been with me and grown up in Pentecostalism, you know reincarnation would have never been taught in your church. And so that would encourage thoughts of reincarnation and hypnosis. She said she had always felt out of place at the church services. Much of the noise and the gyrations that went on frightened her. As a young girl in church, she often had the urge to cross herself in the manner of the Catholics, and it seemed a perfectly natural thing to do. But after being sternly reprimanded by her mother, she thought it better not to do this in public. Her parents considered her the odd one in the family. Know that feeling. They couldn't understand her reluctance to be like them. It was mostly out of concern for her parents' feelings that she requested to be anonymous in this book. She felt they would never understand, even though the idea of many lives was an easy concept for her to grasp. She didn't want the risk, the possibility that her private life would be upset. I have agreed to respect her wishes and keep her identity a secret. Her family's many moves through many states of the USA had finally brought them to Texas when Katie was 16. She had moved twice during her sophomore year in high school and now again at the beginning of her junior year. She was tired of constant adjusting to new schools, different teaching methods, and temporary friends. Over the protest of her parents, she dropped out of school at the beginning of her junior year. This was the full extent of her formal education, 2 years of high school. This was to become an asset for our work. We could be positive the things she spoke of under hypnosis were not coming from her schooling. I know of no school that teaches such things anyways. They no longer even stress geography as strongly as they once did. She is an extremely intelligent girl, but her knowledge did not come from books. So once out of school and with apparent freedom, she found she couldn't find work easily with such a lack of education or training, and after a year of disappointing menial jobs, she decided at 17 to take a GED test and joined the Air Force to get job training. She spent 2 years there specializing in computers, and another important point for our work was that she never left the United States during her time with the Air Force. Yet while in deep trance, she has described many foreign places with minute detail. And that's one of the things, as you hear some of these, you will be amazed at how minute the details that your mind can see of things that you've already encountered. I mean, really minute, to smells and a lot of other stuff. So when she left the service, she and her family moved once again to the Middle Western city where I met her. She is now using her computer skills, working in an office, and she seems well adjusted, has a normal social life. The extent of her spare time reading is romance and fantasy novels that are so popular now. The idea of researching in a library for the information that is so vital to these regressions would not appeal to her at all. From the first session, I knew that this was no ordinary subject. She went deep quickly, showed sensory sensations such as taste and smell. She experienced emotion and remembered nothing upon awakening. She had always thought she would have no difficulty going in a trance, but she was also surprised at the ease with which it was accomplished. I knew I had found the perfect somnambulistic subject. Is a subject who can drop into that deep trance state very readily. Not everyone can. Some people stay very shallow but are still in a trance. Some people go somewhere in between, but it may take the person who's doing the hypnosis, it may take them more time or to get you to that place to where you actually drop off into that. And as you hear in a minute, she actually set a keyword up with this girl. So the girl sat down, and whether it was on a bed or whether it was on a reclining couch type thing, for the most part, she simply sat down, caught her breath, and Dolores would speak the word, and that girl would be gone in trance. I believe it probably is very similar to what we see with Edgar Cayce. And if you haven't ever studied Edgar Cayce, you should. This is not new technology. It's only new to most Christians. And so, since this is the easiest type to work with, I wanted to have more sessions with her if she was willing. She was also curious and agreed to do it as long as her parents didn't find out. I hoped there would be no problem in this area, but legally she was an adult and could make decisions for herself. She then confessed she had been haunted by memories all of her life that seemed out of place. And I wanted to sow this to you guys. If there are any of you out there who have had these, it's been funny. I've had multiple people come forward and tell me in privacy that they have had multiple experiences. They've had down and including my own child, that they have had experiences when they were young of things that that they saw, and it seemed so real as if it was something they might have lived in the past. And so the truth is unfortunately, we as good parents who train our children right have beat that out of them. And please, I'm not saying you beat your children. I'm talking about the way society programs children. It is almost a form of as if we would beat them. In other words, we would keep them from experiencing the true spirit realm, which we were created to function in. You'll see that that goes as we go along in time. And so I hope that there would be no problems, but legally she was okay. So in other words, Dolores isn't doing something behind these people's backs. I don't believe her integrity would have allowed her to do that. So she said she had been haunted by memories all of her life that seemed out of place. She thought the answers might lie in reincarnation, and she wanted to find out. And I think if you are, you should, and that is a desire, I think you should pursue that. You should find out where you live. You will be surprised at what you might find, that the picture isn't exactly as the way, which opens up about 10,000 new questions I have about all of these things, like how can we be women and men both? And what does that mean? I think it's really important. So when it became apparent that I would be able to obtain much valuable information from this girl, we began to meet regularly once a week. Since I live in an isolated rural area, we agreed to meet at my friend Harriet's house. It was located in the city and was easily accessible to all parties concerned. Harriet is a fellow trained hypnotist. She has never worked with a somnambulist and was interested in my work with Katie. She was eager to see what would happen, and after the information began to come forth, I was glad to have Harriet as a witness. Later, others were also present during the sessions. It was hard enough for us to believe what was happening, and we could use all the witnesses we could get in order to rule out the possibility of an accusation of hoax. And you can be sure that those people, when they were doing this and this was all going on, they were like the only ones out there that were doing this. They were castigated on every side, told that it was all lie, it's all fake, it's all brainwashing, it's all, nobody in the science world believed it, and yet now you have psychologists using hypnotherapy to get into people's minds and go back in their past. Quite amazing how Source has changed things as this enlightenment thing that is going on now. It was beginning back then. And so, after the first two sessions, I conditioned her to go into a deep trance upon a mention of a keyword I was speaking about. This is much faster and saves time-consuming preliminary work. We had no idea where this experiment was going, and thus our adventure began. A journey that was to take us to people and places we could not have imagined in our wildest dreams. It became a true journey through time and space. In the beginning, she was never told to go to any certain place or time period. I let the information come forth spontaneously. A month passed, and I decided to become more systematic and try to direct the regressions into some type of chronological order. I began going forward in 100-year jumps, trying to discover how many lifetimes she had lived, but it was quite possible that I missed some along the way. Many times obscure facts would come forth that could only be verified through diligent research. We even encountered the fascinating spirit realm, where we obtained information about what happens after the soul leaves the body and enters the so-called dead state. Much of this will be covered in another book, Between Death and Life, which would certainly benefit you. You will learn a lot. Each week I tried to go back at least one more life, and I thought if any of them were particularly interesting, we could return later and ask more questions. This was the method used in the 5 Lives Remembered, which was actually the first book that she wrote, but I believe that her husband was the main hypnotherapist in this. But the subject of that book only relived 5 lives. It had been much easier. As I took Katie slowly back, we had uncovered 26 separate lives by the time we came to the beginning of the Christian era. Now stop and ponder and think about that. You might think 2, 3, 4 lives is pretty amazing, and here, just to get back 2,000 years, she's already encountered 26 lives, and most probably has actually missed some lives in there that were not quite as long. My second life was in the 1930s, and I was a grown man. So I have no clue when it ended, but I can guarantee you that it ended before 1962. So The many lives seem to be equally divided between male and female. So there's a picture for you. Our bodies really do, friends. I love to say this. It actually is growing in me pretty drastically. Gender only matters for the life that you're presently inhabiting. There is no stoppage. Your spirit is the exact same spirit that has lived in every life that you have lived. It has nothing to do with gender. Gender is of the body. There is no gender, which is what Yeshua was talking about in the spirit realm. And so, when I share the veil is being thinned, and that's why you're starting to see things you haven't seen, I hate to tell you, but one proof that the veil is being thinned is the whole transsexual and children thinking that they're another sex when they're a child. That's really not at all what I thought it was 6 months ago. In fact, it gets very easy for me now to understand why a little boy would say, but I'm a little girl inside. Because that person, if you put them under hypnotherapy, you would probably find in the life that preceded the one they're in now that that child was a little girl, and vice versa. And that's really huge. I have a lot of questions I'd love to answer for you. The many lives seem to be almost equally divided between male and female, rich and poor, intelligent and uneducated. Each one was filled with a wealth of detail about the religious dogma and cultural customs of the time period. I am positive that even a scholar trained in history and anthropology could not come up with the incredible detail that she gave us. No, this knowledge was coming from somewhere else, and I prefer to believe that she actually lived all of those lives, and the knowledge has remained hidden in the vast computer memory banks called the subconscious mind. It only required pushing the right buttons and giving the mind the right signals to cause the knowledge to be brought forward and relived again. We have no idea how many more lives lie waiting to see the light of day once again. The stories of these other lives will be written in another book. It would do them an injustice to try to cram them into one book. This is far too much information. When I found there was a possibility that the entity we had come upon could give information about the life of Christ, I thought it was important to stay with that time period and see what would emerge. I had no idea where the experiment was leading or if anything of value could come forth. But on the slightest chance that something could be found, I stopped taking her backwards and I kept returning to the life of Sudi, one of Jesus' Essene teachers. And so that's one of those little statements that what she's not saying has as much value as what she is saying, but what she is saying is huge and overwhelming. Because here what we're stepping into, and obviously the title of the book gave it away, but we're going to actually begin to see the thoughts and the beliefs that Yeshua really had. And you'll be quite amazed as we get into this information how many things that I've already been sharing with you guys that we have some kind of proof that that's a thought process. I have never read this book before I encountered it. So the things I've taught that were really weird to Christianity for the last 25 years, those things came from somewhere besides just knowledge. And so one of Jesus' Essene teachers is a really profound, hold on to that thought. To get more information, we stayed with this for 13 sessions over 3 months, okay? So this was the compilation of the information you're going to get just in that level. Each one of these regressions is about 8 hours long. So just put that together and you do the math for yourself. There's hundreds of hours that were spent to get what she has here. If this life had been the first I had encountered while working with Katie, I would have immediately dismissed the whole thing as fantasy and stop the sessions. Everyone automatically thinks that if someone mentions having known Jesus, that they must be on an ego trip. But this information did not come forth until I'd been working with her for 9 months. But that time I knew where she was coming from. I knew what tremendous capability she had in recalling past lives in great detail, and we had built up a very strong bond of trust during that time. I believe this is the only way the story could have come out. It took much patience to continue working with one subject and to keep moving systematically backwards. But if I had stopped too soon, this story would have never been written. Even knowing her as well as I did, I was still reluctant to tell anyone that I had discovered someone who was one of the Essenes teachers of Yeshua. I was sure I would get a smirk of disbelief and some snide remark such as, "Oh yeah, now tell me another," and as though I thought them gullible enough to swallow anything. I can understand that. I am sure I would have been skeptical if I had heard this from someone else, but I had to believe her. There was no other way to explain what was happening. There was no possibility of lying. She was speaking from a hypnotic trance so deep that this lying was impossible. And the information that came forth demanded rigorous research and speaking with several experts on the subjects, yet she never knew at any time where we would go next and what I would ask her. Her answers came spontaneous and naturally. In the beginning days of our work, she wanted to hear the tape, recordings after the sessions were over. Later, she showed less and less interest, merely asking upon awakening, "Well, where did we go today?" She didn't care about listening to the session. She often expressed amazement because she said she knew very little about the time period or the country covered. After the Jesus material began to come forth, it started to bother her somewhat. Maybe it was her old religious background rearing its head, especially when she began to say things that were controversial and contradictory to the Bible. It began to overwhelm her, and she said it did not seem possible that all of this was coming from her. It was mind-boggling. The one life bothered her more than any of the others we had gone through. Whatever the reason was, at the time she decided she did not want to have any more sessions. She was planning to move away. Her company wanted her to transfer to another branch office with a promotion and more pay. She also thought a year was long enough to work on regression experiments. It was time to call it to a halt, and I agreed that she should pursue her life wherever it might lead her. I would have liked to have had a few more sessions. I was doing research by that time and wanted some answers to things that were puzzling me, but I thought, would I ever have all the questions answered? And even if they were, would always be questions that someone else would come up with. We would probably never be able to answer all possible questions and confidently close the book on that life. To consider it totally wrapped up as it is, I think I have covered a very wide range by asking about the living conditions and the custom and the knowledge that were taught by the Essenes. Chapter 3, Meet Sudi, and it's actually pronounced more like Saudi. I was keeping fairly close track of the time periods as we went slowly back, and I had the different lives listed in a notebook. This was the only way I could keep them straight. She was never confused as to who or where she was, but many times I was at a loss, so the notebook was essential to me. I had to refer to it many times. It is difficult to convey the appearance of this phenomena through words on paper. The people she became were very real, with emotions and facial and body mannerisms that were characteristic of each one. I became so familiar with these different individuals that I soon was able to recognize each one before they gave their name. That's how real this is. You watch changes in people's personality. In the last few weeks, we had seen her as the doctor in Alexandria discussing the drugs and method of surgery used in 400 AD. Then she was a yellow-robed monk in the mountains of Tibet talking about Buddhist philosophy in 300 AD. Then came the surprise of finding a girl around 200 AD who could not hear or speak. Normally, I would have directed Katie to go back another 100 years, This time my instruction had to be worded differently. Since she could not communicate very well, we were not certain of the time period we were in. The personalities would often have strong accents which made transcribing difficult. There is a strange pattern I have noticed about the manner in which the different entities speak English. It is as though they are mentally translating from one language to another. When this occurs, the words are transposed out of their natural order. Often what sounds like bad grammar is in another example of this strange phenomenon. It gives one the impression that the entity, the being with whom we come into contact, cannot speak English and is trying to find the correct words from somewhere in Katie's brain or computer banks. This often results in mistakes in grammar, sentence structure, or word order that she would have never made in her natural waking state. And maybe some of you have seen people, maybe you've talked to a customer service that is over in India, and the way they speak words out of order. So that's really not at all that uncommon. What is amazing is that a girl who can speak English perfectly has those same failures as somebody who lives over in a foreign country. I believe this is just another small point suggesting the reincarnation. Her conscious mind would not do those things. I came to know the entity called Sudi quite well and eventually could understand his strong accent. His voice was also changed with age. He was young and vibrant as a child, then gradually more mature until he spoke with a very tired voice in his old age. This matter of gender is going to present a problem in telling this story. She is a girl telling the story of a male. It would be confusing to constantly shift from he to she and back again, and I think the solution would be to call the entity he and only refer to she when referring to Katie's physical body and its movements. Similarly, in most cases, dialogue spoken by Sudi is preceded by the letter S, while in the latter parts, when we talk to Katie's soul after Sudi's death, the letter K precedes the dialogue. I, Dolores, am D. I want the reader to meet him the same way we did. And here we go. Here's Dolores. Let's go back further into time to a time before this girl who couldn't hear and couldn't speak. I will count to 3 and we will be there. 1, 2, 3. We have gone back further in time. Thus, I had no idea of the time period we were in, except that it had to be earlier than 200 AD. The personality that had emerged was a man. He was walking on his way to Nazareth to see his cousin. His voice came forth with such a strong accent that it was difficult to understand him. His pronunciation of the word Nazareth was so different that I did not recognize it until I later played the tape recording back and listened to it carefully, and it sounded like Nathari, spoken quickly. He said it was located in Galilee. Here again, he pronounced the word other than I was accustomed to hearing it. He said Galilee. These names did not become apparent until they were played back. So at the time, I was not sure where Katie was, and I proceeded hoping that the tape recorder had picked it up. There's really nothing unusual about finding a subject describing a past life in Israel. This has happened many times. I have regressed several who lived there during the Roman occupations, but none of these ever mentioned or made any reference to Jesus. The mention of a location does not give any clue as to the circumstances of the individual's life. When I first encounter a new personality, I have certain routine questions I always ask until the location and culture are established. When I know where we are, then I can ask more specific questions. I ask for his name. Sudi, I am Ben Zamir. And it sounded something like Benjamin, and I asked him if that was the name, but he replied, Ben Zamir, with the accent on the last syllable. He said the other name, first name, was not used unless you were important. I asked him what I should call him, and he gave me permission to call him Sudi, which was a play name, a nickname. The pronunciation sounded something like Saudi or Saudi, with an accent on the last syllable. I will use Sudi or Saudi throughout this book since it is easier than Benzimir. Many times in these ancient cultures, the person does not know how old they are, or they have different terminology, but he said, I have 30 years. He was not married. So here's Saudi. No, it is not part of my life. There are those who desire nothing more than a family, and there are those who have many things to accomplish in their lives, that to have a wife and possibly children would bring them sorrow. Therefore, it is unnecessarily cruel to others to ask them to share. This is why you have no desire to marry? Saudi replies, I did not say I did not have the desire. I just stated that I probably would not. He said he usually lived in the hills, and there was a community there that was maybe 2 days' journey away. And when I asked the name of the community, which is a normal question, the personality changed. Normally, Katie would answer questions without hesitation, but Saudi suddenly showed suspicion and asked curtly, why do you wish to know? This was unusual, and I could not understand the reaction, and I explained that I was just curious. After much hesitation, he finally said it is called Qumran, which he pronounced as Qumran. At the time, this name meant nothing to me, and I resumed my questions, and I asked about his occupation. Saudi responds, I study the books of the Torah, and I study law, Hebrew law. This was also did not mean anything to me. As a Protestant, I didn't know what the Torah was. And I thought he meant law such as legal law that is used in the courts. I was to receive much education within the next few months, as I discovered the Torah was the Jewish religious book, and the law referred to the laws of Moses, which the Jewish people patterned their lives after. I asked if he was what some people call a rabbi, and I assumed we had come across an educated Jewish man, and I knew a rabbi had something to do with their religion and possibly education. We, the people involved in this experiment, have had little contact with Jewish people, knew almost nothing about the Jewish religion, and had never been to a synagogue. He answered that he was not a teacher, only a student. So I at least found out that rabbi means teacher. When I'm working with Katie, I often feel very stupid because I do not know the basic things about the time period she is in. But then I never know where we will go and cannot be prepared for all possibilities. So I must draw on what limited knowledge I may have or feel my way by questioning. I think the people who say I must be asking leading questions to get these lives to come forth can see that this is not true. I have no way of knowing what will happen next and often feel I am only going along for the ride. And so Dolores' next question is what are you going to do when you finish your training? And Saudi responds, go abroad amongst the people and share with them what we have learned. Does it take very long to become a teacher? Response, for some it is a lifetime. For others, their path begins early. I cannot remember a time when I did not study. Are the rabbis the ones that teach you? You speak of rabbis. I believe you mean in the sense of the village rabbi. I have my masters who would teach me, but I am not taught by rabbis in the village. Who are your masters? And I meant by my question what religion or type of school they were affiliated with, but he thought I meant their names. There is Ben David, who is the teacher of mathematics. There is Mikalava, who is the teacher of the mysteries, just so that you get something here. Prior to Christianity, what do you think that term, the teacher of the mysteries, might be? There is my teacher of the Torah, who is Zabir, my father. He, through Katie's face, smiled at the mention of his father, and I drew the conclusion that there must be affection there. And my teacher of righteousness, that's another term that you find all over the Essene writings that I've read. The teacher of righteousness had to do with everything. Is a long name here that I could not transcribe. She teaches the thing. I'll have you notice something else. The teacher of righteousness in this Qumran sect at this time is a woman. She teaches the things that have been handed down, all of the laws of truth, of the things that are protected. There is Judith Basezir. What she has taught me are the prophecies of the stars. Now listen, what are the prophecies of the stars? Some of that could be tied to modern day astrology, which Christianity condemns. So these kids were taught this their whole life. Prophecies of the stars, the knowledge of their pathways, so astronomy. It is said that when she speaks, all listen. She has a great many years. She is perhaps 70, maybe even older. I am not sure. She has great knowledge in other areas. This is just one. Do most boys have to study these things at some time in their life? And Saudi responds, there's a point in every Hebrew young man's life when he must study the law and the Torah. But it is usually when he has his bar mitzvah. But if you wish to become a master or a teacher, to follow the pathway, you must always leave yourself open for learning. So in other words, you're supposed to be learning your whole life. Do you get teachings from any place else? And Saudi responds, you mean if the knowledge comes from afar, this does. But my teachers, they live with us. So another hidden concept for you. Where would these teachings that a Hebrew boy is learning that come from afar, what do you think that means? If you're in Israel, and Israel is the Hebrew, and Israel is where all of this is taught, and he's learning from belief systems that are taught afar, all you have to do is stop and historically figure out what belief systems were being taught from the Far East and from Hindu and from China, and you come then to Hinduism, you come then to what the Tibetan monks, which is a form of Hinduism, you come to Buddha, which is a form of Hinduism. So, yeah, that kind of blows a lot of things about what we've been told, that smooth out of the water. So then, get this. It wasn't that weird that Yeshua would have gone to Tibet to study. You mean if the knowledge comes from afar, this does. But my teachers, they live with us. When my father was young, he traveled to many places that are known to us and studied many things which he tries to impart to me. I assure you, there was no provision against any of the things that Christianity has prevented us from learning. Is this the custom that some will go to different lands to learn from others? So it is with us, yes. It is duty to pass on knowledge. Listen at this. For this is a great sin to not share with those who have thirst. So Saudi had not yet traveled to any other countries in pursuit of knowledge, but he thought it was very possible that he would be fortunate enough to do so. Dolores, how is this decision made? Saudi's response, there will be a sign for us that it is time and that he has come and that we must move. My father says that it will be told in the heavens and that we will know. I didn't understand what he meant, so I asked who was coming. He answered in a matter-of-fact manner, the Messiah. The time is known to a few. So for all of the Christianity that no man will know the time or the hour, they knew they were waiting for the Messiah to come. They knew what the signs were. Where would you learn that? You only could have learned that, and he'll explain that. I was not sure what to make of this statement. I'm sure after she did all of her research, when she was done with this part and went into the research phase of this book, she then began to understand. So Dolores, has it been said that the Messiah has already come? I was not sure what time period we were in, and I knew that the Jews have never acknowledged that the Messiah ever came. They are still looking for him to this day, and I thought Sadi was probably a Jewish man living sometime after the birth of Christ. There was always the possibility of getting some information about the man Jesus. Surely a learned man would know the stories of his time. And Sadi says, no, he has not come. For the heavens have not let it be known. It is said that from four corners the stars will rise together, and when they meet, it will be the time of his birth. But I have heard it said that he has already come. Have you heard these stories? No, he has not come. For as long as there have been Jews, there have been many rumors of false prophets and false messiahs. But he is not here. Have your people ever heard of a man called Jesus? Some people have said that he is the Messiah who came. They say he lived in Nazareth in Bethlehem. I have not even heard that name. It is unknown to me. There is no one in Nazareth that is of that name. Otherwise, I would know him. This time when he mentioned Nazareth, it made me realize that he would be in or near the Holy Land. I asked if Bethlehem was near, and he acknowledged that it was. I also heard of the country of Judea. Is that near there? Rather impatiently, he answers, it is here. She always knew where she was, even if I was often confused. Not that I definitely had the country, the locale. I set about trying to establish the time period. Dolores, who is the ruler at this time in your land? Saudi, King Herod. I knew that according to the Bible there was more than one King Herod, one who reigned at the time of Jesus' birth and another at the time of his death. For all I knew, there could be even more. Dolores, I have heard that there have been many King Herods. Is that true? Saudi seemed confused. This is Herod the First. There were no others. He is the father of Antipas and Philip, but this is Herod. And I felt a shiver of excitement. Maybe Jesus had not yet been born. What do you think of King Herod? He is very much under the thumb of the Romans. This is not good, and a sigh. He is a bloodthirsty lecher. His emotion surprised me. Oh, I've heard many stories, some good and some bad. Saudi responds, oh no, you cannot know anything of Herod to ask these questions. I have never heard of any good of Herod. Does Herod live in Jerusalem? At times. He has many residences throughout. Sometimes he would travel to other areas. Have you ever seen him? No, I have no wish to see that. It was very evident that he was not fond of Herod. He did not like discussing him, and I was still wondering what time period we were in. It would be difficult to get a year since our years are reckoned from the time of Christ. These people must have used a different method of keeping track of the years if they had not born yet. And Saudi says, there are 12 months for each of the 12 tribes. The year is. He seemed to be having difficulty finding the answer. The years are numbered by the years of the king. I'm not sure. I think 'tis the 20th year of his reign. For some reason, that event, Harriet herself could not explain. She had an obsession with finding out something about the group known as the Essenes. She had said repeatedly, I certainly wish you would hurry and get to that time period. She said later, she somehow knew that something important was waiting there. And when she said this, I would answer, but I don't even know when they lived. And she said she thought it was during the time of Christ. I would then state, well, we're heading that way, and I would continue my methodical plotting backwards by 50 and 100-year jumps. Much to her frustration, each separate lifetime held its own share of surprises and historical knowledge, and so I was in no hurry to speed up the procedure that had proven so effective. Now that it was obvious we were in the correct time period, Erich seized the opportunity and asked, "Have you ever heard of a group that is known as the Essenes?" Sadi surprised us by answering, "Yes. Why do you ask of these?" Elated, Harriet answered, "I just wondered if you knew anything about them, if they followed your teachings." Sadi said, "They are my teachers." This was a surprise and gave the promise of a monumental breakthrough to be able to learn something about such a secretive, unknown group. "Oh," Harriet remarked, "we have been searching for them." Sadi responds, "They have no wish to be found. Unless they desire it, you will not find us." He had thus indicated that he was a member of the group. I wondered if this secrecy would create trouble in finding answers about them. So Dolores asked, "I have heard the Essenes are like a secret organization. Would that be correct?" He responds, "They are greatly feared by those who are in power because we have studied into the mysteries that others have only hinted at. And they fear that if we gain too much power and knowledge, that they will lose their place." Is anybody awake? My God. How do they differ from the regular Jewish community? There is more strict adherence to the laws. More adherence to the average Jew means upon the end of Shabbat, he leaves the synagogue and he does not remember it again until the beginning of the next Shabbat. To us, the law and the Torah are all. We must not forget that this is why that we live. Much time is spent during the defining of the prophecies given and knowing that this is the time that they shall be culminated, and it is our duty to prepare others for this time and to prepare the way. Does anyone remember what Yehukanan the Immerser's comment was? Right, they totally tied the prophecy to he is preparing a way. Both together. We were again surprised when he told us that women as well as men are members of their sect. So once again, this is pre-Judaism, pre-Christianity, and you're already getting a massively different picture about humanity, folks. I really am very sad, and I want to say this, I am very sad of the belief system that I was brought up in. It is a very saddening thing. They were teachers and students alike. This was surprising because women in the average Jewish community at that time were not allowed the distinction of equality with men. Sudi confirmed this. In most synagogues, women are not even allowed inside. They have the women's terrace, and I wondered why women are allotted this honor with the Essenes. Saudi responds, "It is said that one way from the other is not complete, so all knowledge must be shared so that it can never be lost. I have known women who have more brains than the average rabbi," was his comment. This statement amused and delighted us, but he became suspicious again when I asked for an idea of how large the community was. He asked cautiously, "Why do you wish to know?" I had to think of an answer that he would not consider threatening. "I'm just interested in the size of the community because of the living conditions. I would think if it were very large, it would be difficult to house or feed." Saudi relaxed and said the number was not known for sure. And so Dolores asked the question, "Is there any dissension between the Essene teachers and the Jewish teachers in the area?" Saudi's response, "Yes, they call us crazy because we believe that the time is at hand. They have given up hope for the coming of the Messiah. He was frowning deeply and seemed uneasy. I am curious to know why you wish this knowledge. I would prefer not to answer anymore. There are many who would find out about our community and see it destroyed." I was unaware that the Essenes had enemies during that time. Dolores, you said you were going to your cousins. If your people have enemies, aren't you afraid that someone will find you while you're out like this? His response, they do not know who I am. To them, I am just a traveler. I do not have blue skin. And we laughed. We may tell each other by certain ways, but others may not tell us. Since I have heard that the Essenes were a secret religious order living in seclusion like monks in a monastery, I asked if there was a name of their kind of religion. And his response says, it has no name. We are known as the Essenes. But this, as my father speaks, it is a school of thought, not religion. He had difficulty with that word. We believe in God, the Father. Do you have a name for God in your language? Yahweh. It means with no name. For God is the nameless one. He has no name that man has knowledge of. They are also known as the Elohim, that's supposed to be Elohim, and Eloah. They are basically the same thing. They speak of God. They are many names by which you may call upon him, and he will know you speak of him. These are just a few. When I speak to him, I do not call him Yahweh. I call him Abba, which means Father. Which is, you find that statement also in Paul's writings when he says, whereby we may call him Abba, Father. So, we had made the breakthrough into the time of Christ and had met one of the Essenes, the most mysterious and secretive group in history. When I realized the potential of what we might have, I decided to stay with this lifetime and explore it more fully. Who could tell? It might even reveal something about the life of Christ. And we might be able to find out some information about this little-known group. Of course, Saudi was showing signs of suspicion and reluctance to answer certain questions. But I felt this could be dealt with. There are many ways of going around a topic to get the desired answers. Still, I never expected what would happen within the next 3 months. The incredible amount of knowledge and information that poured forth was like riding a whirlwind. It came so fast and furious, it at times took our breath away. We did not expect what was to come, and we got more than we bargained for. In the next chapters, I have tried to compile the information according to content. It did not come through in this manner. It was like putting an incredible, complicated puzzle together, taking a piece from one session and a piece from another. But I think this way of presenting it makes for easier reading. There are twofold purposes in this book. One is to present the accumulated knowledge about the customs and living conditions of the vague and shadowy group known as the Essenes. The other is to relate the life of Christ against this background as he was associated with this group and as has seen through the eyes of a loving teacher. Well, I did it, and I'm sorrowful if I pushed. Hopefully that'll goad you and encourage you to get the book, because I'm telling you, friends, what we don't know is infinitely more than what we do know. But the beauty of that is if we, like Saudi, are desirous and hunger for the truth, can I tell you what the scripture tells us? From Master Isa himself, those who seek will find. I used to marvel at that statement, because all of the people who were not seeking really never had any opportunity. Can I tell you right now that billions and billions and billions of people fill churches every Sun Worship Day, and none of those people have a desire to know what the truth is. If you're here today and you have a desire to know what the truth is, I have to tell you, Source loves you so much, and I don't mean that a little bit. I don't mean that in a way that your mind can even comprehend how much he loves us. But there is absolutely no question, friend, that if you're here today, it's not a coincidence. And so I hope you guys will ponder. I know I had to go at a little faster rate, and I'm glad I did, because you got some groundwork of the things already, 2 or 3 major things that have come out that most of the world still doesn't agree with. And so I hope you guys have been blessed. We are on a journey, and it is a journey of enlightenment. We are already the light. The enlightenment doesn't come because we know more about God. The enlightenment is us knowing ourselves. Peace to each and every one of you. I hope you feel his presence in his spirit. I hope that you will open your heart and mind. If you're not meditating, I hope that you will entertain the idea at minimum. If you do it and you don't have anything happening, everything takes time. So, once again, blessings and peace to each and every one of you. We'll be back, if Source is willing. We will be back on Saturday at 2 o'clock. We hope to bless you. And we hope to see you then. Namaste.